Hi, my name is Debbie and I'm a practice nurse in London. Today I'm going to be discussing what to do when you're offered a job. Now, I recently got a message from somebody asking a few questions just about a job offer that she'd gotten, and I realized that not many people actually know, especially if you're leaving one role to go into another, just different situations like that. So let's talk about it. So the first thing you want to do is read your contract. Read it like you mean it. Read it thoroughly, understand what the sick policy is, make sure that your pay reflects what is written on that contract. Pay wise reflects what you discussed at the interview, if it was mentioned, or what was on the job advert. Just make sure it reflects. You know who to answer to, who's your manager, who's your line manager, who is your mentor, who is going to be these people. Make sure you have these things, you know, in place as much as possible. Sometimes, you know, all of that isn't discussed until induction, but if you know it can be discussed with you beforehand, then you know, make sure all of that is on the contract, the offer letter, whatever it is that they send to you. Number two, I would say, is check what the progression prospects are like, and if it's mentioned on the offer letter or contract. Why do I say this? So when I got my job, on my offer letter, it simply said, you know, you're a practice nurse, this is what's expected of you, this is your pay, and that was it. There was no form of, you know, in a few months' time we can review your pay, or this and that and that. And I didn't really think too much of it. I was just happy to be a practice nurse at the time. But I realized only later that, you know what, there's been no mention of, you know, when my appraisal would be. These are things I just had to find out. You know, there's just not been anything that indicates that there is a progression prospect. And so during my 1 year appraisal, I mentioned that. I said, you know what, when I was given my offer letter, my contract, when I first started here, there was no indication of what my pay would increase to, or what the, you know, what the process is. And they realized that, you know what, we haven't put this information in. And you know, they apologized and readjusted my offer letter, and were able to mention that yearly, you know, I would have a pay review, and you know, these are the targets, these are the things that would you know, that you should be aiming for, and that we will review again in a year's time. So things like that. Don't be caught up in the moment of getting a job. Make sure you're checking these things, because when it comes to your appraisal, or when you want a pay rise, you're going to feel stuck, because it's like there was never a mention of it, and now you have to bring it up yourself. So number three, I would say, is know your annual leave. Know how many hours you're getting, if you're getting bank holidays off or not, things like that, just so that you know, you're not shocked by having less annual leave, or you know, just there's just little things we tend to miss, such as, can you carry over your annual leave, or can you get the money's equivalent? There are some places like that if you don't take your annual leave, you're either forced to take it, or you can carry it over to the next annual leave year, or you know, you can get the money equivalent to that annual leave. So little things like that, try and find that out. Another thing I would say is know what your notice period is. The reality is that you can start a role and you may not like it. You know, that's just the reality, especially in nursing. You know, you want to try a new thing, you want to try a new type of nursing, you want to just do something different, and you find out, you know what, this isn't for me. Just know what your notice period is, so that when you are moving on to the next place, you're able to, you know, just give the appropriate notice. One thing that's very important, another thing that I would say, is when giving notice to, if you're leaving from one job to another job, just make sure that you have your contract have your contract before you give your notice, is what I would personally say. The last thing you want is to give your notice, you've read your contract and you're like, what is this? And you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck, I don't think I can leave. You know, make sure everything is in place. For some people, they tell their jobs that, you know, I'm actively looking for another role, so any minute now I could be leaving. But if you're in a predicament where it's like you're not too sure, you don't really want to tell management just yet that you want to leave, then, you know, I would just strongly advise you wait for your contract to come and everything to be in place, and then give your notice. And then another thing that I always do, if you've not already told them in your interview what your holidays, what holidays you want off, or that you have off already, then I'll strongly advise you do that as soon as possible. The last thing you want is to start a job and, you know, you've got holidays booked or things that you already pre-planned or you want to take off, and because you've started a new role, they tell you that you can't have it off because someone else is off on that time. If you let them know from the interview time, then very rarely will they say that no, you can't have it off, because you already booked it off. So they can already pre-plan and work around it to say that, okay, you know, you've already got that time off, so we should be able to respect that. So I hope that helps. When you do get your job offer, you know, just make sure that you have all these various things in place, making sure you have all your letters, your addresses, just so that it can be a smooth process. It can be quite stressful, but if you have, you know, your passport, all these things, all these documents together in a folder already, then it should be a smooth process.